Okay, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Franklin J. Quinlan. I live in United States, and the part of United States I live in is in the state of Michigan, in a small town called Davisburg. That's a wide spot in the road. Anyway, my background is, I'll give you my age first. I'm 97 years old, and all my forebears are from Ireland. So I have to add this in. If I was any more Irish, the cows would eat me. Anyway,
Grandfather.
Okay. Anyway, I'll talk about my grandfather. My grandfather lived in a town called Knockabilla in County Tipperary in Ireland. And he decided the potato famine was just too bad, and so he left in 1848 on a sailing ship and landed in New York City, and then from there he migrated to Albany, New York, and from Albany he migrated to Detroit, Michigan, where he lived for a few years, and then he met a woman named Elizabeth McGuire, who was a Canadian. And because the McGuires came up through the St. Lawrence rather than through New York City. Anyway, they were married at Trinity Parish in downtown Detroit, and at that time Detroit was not a very big city. Trinity Parish is now within a stone's throw of downtown Detroit, and at that time it was on the outskirts of Detroit. So they were married there in 1855. And their first child, they were married in January of 1855, and she became pregnant and had a child called Timothy Quinlan. Well, Timothy didn't last very long, so we have no more record of. I have his birth certificate, but or his baptismal certificate. But then, for some reason, probably because my grandmother's people were all in Canada, so the two of them then moved over to Windsor and stayed in Windsor for a while, and then had a child called Philip. And Philip was born, that's my Uncle Phil, was born in 1856. So that was pre-Civil War. In fact, Uncle Phil was 9 years old when the Civil War ended. They then migrated out towards Maidstone, Ontario, is in the county of Essex. And they lived with different relatives for a while until they were able to save some money. They were selling land in Maidstone for 100 acres for $300, and they had saved up $100 in gold. So the story goes that my grandmother walked from Maidstone into Windsor to settle the real estate deal, which she put down $100 in gold and mortgaged it for $200 with London Life. So they then built they cleared the land, most of the land in Maidstone Township at that time in the late 50s and early 60s was all swamp timberland. So you had to clear. So they cleared 100 acres and built a home and raised 8 children there, my father being one of them, and my father was the last one of that generation to own the farm. It's now still owned by the Quinlan family of a later generation. I had numerous first cousins. I am the last living first cousin of all the children of my grandfather John Quinlan and Elizabeth Quinlan. All their offsprings have died, and all their offsprings, of course, would be their children would be all my first cousins. They're all passed away. So I am the last of the generation of my grandfather's time, you know. So I possibly also might be one of the last grandsons of the potato famine from the 40s, you know. My grandfather, when he came to this country, already had a trade. He was a carpenter. And when he came because of the Great Famine. He couldn't find employment or food or substance of any kind. So he was forced to board a sailing ship and spend about a month and a half on the Atlantic Ocean, landing in the city of New York, which he then migrated to some relatives in Albany, but then he migrated from there to the city of Detroit, and he settled there for a while. But I'd also like to mention my grandmother's, that was my father's side of the story. On my mother's side, my mother's name was Casey, and her mother's father was Daly. Now the Daly people, they migrated much earlier. In 1838, they migrated to the New York State. They then migrated to the state of Michigan and to Washtenaw County. Now my great-grandfather, James Daly, eventually entered politics, and he became a representative in the State House in Lansing, Michigan, for one term from 1875 to 1876. And that's the background of my mother's people, who were Dalys, and my great-grandmother also was a Kilroy. So and if you know the word Kilroy, it's all over the world, you know. Kilroy was here. Anyway, that's about...
Jeremiah Casey, you didn't
tell me. Yes, my grandfather was Jeremiah Casey. And Jeremiah Casey, we don't have him pinned down, but we think Jeremiah Casey was from Cork. But he came and settled in Pennsylvania, and then he migrated to Detroit and settled in Detroit and married a Daly. And that's about that would cover my genealogy background.